11 seconds remaining. One last rush perhaps for the Flyers. Giroux to Hartnell. To Giroux. Giroux holds all the way across. Parker scores! 2.1 seconds remaining, and the Flyers are on top.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. Okay, and we are back. Chef had to go take a powder. Not actually. He will be back with our show on Monday. And you stick around with the O&B Puckcast. We're going to announce later in this O&B special who our special guest is going to be. All right, so without any further ado, welcome to this O&B special. And I'm here with, from SteelFlyers.com. He has a weekday show, Pearl of Wisdom, and he's been doing it in some form or fashion for quite a while. He's back with us for, third time or so. Steve Duncan, how are you, man?
I am doing absolutely fantastic, sir. I'm so excited to be part of this program. I love you guys, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. Right back at you. So, yeah, it's an interesting time. Obviously, since our last show, the Flyers have played a few games, a couple losses versus Boston, and then a wild and woolly fun game on Sunday, the 7th, versus the Capitals. And then since then, they've been in COVID protocol, which has kind of shut things down. They already knew the Devils games that were scheduled for the 11th and the 13th weren't going to happen because of issues there. And apparently, along with Travis Sanheim, Claude Giroux and Justin Braun are in protocol. And
Right.
Steve, as you know, that could mean that these players either have the virus itself or they were exposed to somebody who had the virus. And they're kind of, being cool about that, I guess, out of respect to the CBA that they hammered out, that if someone wants to come forward and say that they had it, fine. If not, so be it. So they're very secretive about that, and that's fine. But the Flyers' next game is on the 14th in New York against the Rangers. So just any comments you have about what's been going down over the last little bit.
As far as the COVID, it's disappointing, of course, but there's people out there that have a job to do, and I'm sure they're doing the best thing they can to make decisions to keep this thing rolling. That's really what it comes down to here, is we're all just kind of a little anxious about the idea of the season having any disruptions whatsoever, just because we love hockey, right? So, but I'm glad. I mean, I'm taking it to a positive side. I'm really glad that they're taking all the precautions possible to make sure everybody's safe, first, and then the season will continue. And there's really not much more I can say about that. I just hope that everything works out. I trust that the way they're doing it, everything will be fine.
Yeah, I think they have different levels of preparation based on contingencies.
Contingency plans, or kind of rolling with the punches a little
right,
bit.
Exactly.
Right?
So, I mean, that they know what they're doing, and
Mm-hmm.
all the other sports have had to deal with this type of problem, and they'll be fine. I think they have some elasticity there. They want to get, 56 games. So they could go as little as like 48 or something. Look, they're going to get it done. They're going to get it played. This is a virus that fortunately has not been too serious for most people under a certain age, as long as they don't have certain conditions. And,
right.
We move on. So
yeah,
I think the topic of discussion today is, what are the Flyers now after 13 games? They're 8-3-2.
Mm-hmm.
They are tied technically with the Boston Bruins, who've had their number for certain. I think the Flyers have only had 2 points out of the possible 8, and I think they were both overtime losses. So, there's in the league, the Flyers probably are in the upper echelon, the lower part of the upper echelon of the league. Mm-hmm. And just your thoughts about the team so far, based on your expectations going into the season as we get close to what might be the quarter mark, depending how many games they actually play.
Well, it's sort of a yin and a yang. On the positive note, there's been a lot of great things that were unexpected to me. That has me looking forward to what's going to the future for the Philadelphia Flyers. James Van Riemsdyk playing as well as he has been a revelation. That is like, wow. I mean, I was the first one to say staple a first-round draft pick on James Van Riemsdyk and send him away. Now, I don't know if there was injury issues that was going on there, so I'm just going on ice performance, right? But that has been huge. Individual players playing well has been great. What Philadelphia is still learning, and I do believe they will learn, is how to push back as a team in games they need to push back in. This is a team that has the talent to get by, but is learning to be. And if you want to see how they measure up with that right now, as far as I'm concerned, look at their record against what is a team that already is the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, I lost you. You cut out a little bit there. Could you repeat that last little bit?
Okay. This is a team that's learning to be a championship team, that has all the pieces to get by in the regular season and win. We've seen this with other teams, to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I put them in that area as far as individual talent is concerned. What they're learning to do is to be the type of team that, as a team, can have the pushback in games and play a 60-minute game that makes them a championship team. And where they are in that regard, I think you can look at their record against a team that's already accomplished that in the Boston Bruins and it shows you that they have some work to do.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you look at just shots for and against. I think their differential is like 100 minus. I mean, that's been the part watching them has been most frustrating. Because
right.
if you break it down, and we'll talk about individual players, but let's just talk about the team itself.
Mm-hmm.
In general, they have not had good structure. And you could immediately point to, well, their number one defensive player, their Selke Award-winning center, Sean Couturier, has been out all but 2 games and 1 shift of another.
Right.
And so he's only played in 2 of those games. And
right.
what's been some of the problems? They've blown some leads. Their structure in general, their game has been helter-skelter. They have had a heck of a time getting out of their zone, although I think there's definitely an indictment there for the forwards to some degree, but the defense has not been good. So there's an issue defensively and structurally with the team. Their PK has been in and out. It's right now at about just over 70%, which is almost like 9-10% less than the league average. That's been an issue. So while they are racking up some wins, they have played a lot of hockey where they won, where you thought to yourself, they got outshot. The Corsi and the shot attempts is really negative. The expected goals for is same thing. So they probably have deserved to win really only about 4 or 5 of these contests statistically. And even if you throw out the high and the low, that's got to come back and bite you, especially that shots for and against. And so then you go from that perspective and you take a deeper dive. What really is going on that will put them in a situation where it's not sustainable? That's the concern. Yeah, they have 18 points out of a possible 26. There's no way they can play this way again over the same span of games and get that kind of result. What say you?
I mean, I think individually, I guess I do believe that they could make the playoffs just because of their talent on their roster. And when you see the shots like that they're getting outshot, what they have is they have now some high percentage shooters like Van Riemsdyk and Farabee and stuff like that. I think they probably could. We see it all the time. Teams that Tampa Bay is a perfect example of that. They've all through, even when they had their big run where they pretty much beat everybody, there were a lot of games there where they won games where you're like, how did they really win that? You know what I mean? It's just because they have the talent. The problem, again, I believe, and this is the reason why you see a lot of these shot differentials and stuff like that, is I find that when it comes time for Philadelphia to push back or smell blood, they have a tendency to sit back rather than be aggressive, which is what their game is, and rely on their talent rather than being a team. You understand? Or would you agree is a better way of putting it? I think that's what the coaching staff is having the greatest difficulty with, hence the reason why you have Travis Konechny being sit. Because he is that. If he's not being that, nobody's going to be that. And not only that, you mentioned about Coots being out. Well, I mentioned the Boston Bruins team. It didn't seem to stop them to have a Rocket Richard candidate to be out of the lineup.
No, but you hit on a couple of things. Let me touch on a couple of things. If you talk about Tampa and even Boston, both of those teams have something the Flyers don't have. The Flyers do not have a top 10 talent in the league. Like, I think the number one sniper in the league, you could argue, is Ovechkin, but Pasternak, Kucherov, those are two of the names that are really going to be high on your list. In other words, they have elite talent. The Flyers have one elite defensive player, and I don't even think he's an elite center in Couturier. So that's one thing. The other part of this is those shooting percentages you're talking about are for those elite talents who are known career-wise to be able to maintain a certain percentage, whereas you get a player like Van Riemsdyk, whose shooting percentage right now is like 23%. His career shooting percentage is 12%. Even at his best, when he was tipping in goals and scoring 30-plus or what have you. So, and I don't think Joel Farabee is going to be at 21%. Or Voracek, whose career is probably 8%, he's twice that now. So if you follow along that line of logic, the Flyers are more of a lunch pail team. They have a lot of players that are better than average, might make some all-star teams, but they don't, and they have a lot of depth in that way. But they don't have the Kucherov. They don't have the Pasternak, the Stamkos, or even, I mean, you don't have the championship pedigree of Bergeron and Marchand that goes back to 2011. So there's this will that you develop as a champion that is right there with the skill. And we saw that in the Bruins game when, remember that Marchand goal where they just collapsed around the net and they just wanted it more than the Flyers. It looked like it. I'm not saying they necessarily did. The Flyers have not achieved enough as a core, as a group, to demonstrate their ability to impose their will upon teams. And it hits on another theme you're talking about. I think you were talking about the physicality, the fact that they don't close out games, and they don't have a killer instinct. I think all these things are related. Right. The Flyers don't have a lot of shoot-first players. A shoot-first player is kind of a little bit selfish, but also has that killer instinct. Hey, I see an opening, I'm taking it. And I think that kind of is pervasive around the whole team. It's a very deferential group. No, you take it, you take it, you take it. We see a lot of that. And I think a lot of times that translates in their ability to close out games. And this is where they miss a player like Matt Niskanen, who won a cup, who seemed to calm down that group. And it leads us into another topic about what was happening in the off season. But yeah, I'll let you comment on what I'm talking about there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. You mentioned like the Boston Bruins. What the Boston Bruins have, and as far as shoot first guys are concerned, they definitely could have more of that. I think we're going to see more of Oscar Lindblom. I mean, he doesn't have that elite talent, but he's more of a he can be more of a shoot first guy if you can turn him into that. One thing I am seeing with these players, again, I like to go back to it, is AV is doing well with the players individually. I'm seeing improvement in players individually. No doubt about it. Scott Lawton's having a good. Joel Farabee has been improved almost every year. James Van Riemsdyk, who a lot of us have put out to the side, is not just having a high shooting percentage, but also just playing better as a whole.
No doubt.
Yeah, just in general. So we have these individual players that are doing very well. Now, what has to happen, and the word I use, especially when I'm talking about the Boston Bruins, is team belief. And that's what you're talking about, what I think you were talking about when you're talking about the Boston Bruins just look like they want it more. I would even go further and say it looks like they believe it more. The Boston Bruins believe they are going to win no matter what's happening.
Right. They're not conceited. They're convinced.
They're convinced, yeah, exactly.
But how do you have to earn that? How do you earn that? By actually accomplishing something. They've done it. They went to 3 finals since 2011, right? Counting 2011, right? They went in 13. They went in the year versus St. Louis. What was that? 20. So, 19.
I don't know exactly. 19, okay.
Yeah, they were 11, 13, 19. And they won a cup in 2011. They were this close versus St. Louis, 7 games. And they beat that championship pedigree. It's having cachet. And the Flyers have never had that. I think
you have to have that to be that, though, too. You got to believe it before you get it. And right now, that's where I think I think they're going to accomplish it. I do. But right now, they're not in this. I don't see a team that believes that they are as good as they are. You understand what I mean?
Well, sure. I mean, I was just reading Bruce Arians' discussion about how he convinced Tom Brady to come to Tampa Bay. And he said, these guys are so much better than they think they are. Yeah. And we could get somebody here who has that pedigree, cachet. We can't get much more in the history of team sports than Tom Brady. And well, that worked out very well. It's one of the reasons I wanted the Flyers to go out and get Zdeno Chara. So whatever kind of liability he might be, he's still good enough to impart the work habits and the attitude and correct people in a professional manner in terms of how you carry yourself, how you dot every I and cross every T, the details of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And the Flyers have not been able to do that with their core group, which is why they've melded away. Braden Shen's not here. Wayne Simmons is no longer here. So what's left? We have the tail end of Claude Giroux, playing fairly well, but sometimes they're not really noticeable. 1 goal in 13 games, 11 points, but 1 goal. And then you have Jake Voracek, who's more or less been the same player, but he's better defensively under AV starting last year. And, JVR, listen, whatever you get from him as a bonus, I still see him as not being here next year. But, hey, I'm very happy to have him. But another player that we should talk about is Travis Konechny. 8 points in 12 games, but that doesn't really tell the story. His defensive game has not been there. He gets benched, as you talked about. He's really scuffling out there, really fighting a 200-foot game. He was interviewed about it. He talked about, I got to play the game the right way. So he's kind of trying to find that happy medium between shooting his own too early, so Robert Haig can't hit him with an outlet pass, and Robert Haig struggles in that regard anyway. Yeah. And being a factor. What I've noticed is Konechny along with Patrick both have become more perimeter players, not around the net, not taking the lead of JVR. And that's hurt their offense. And when you do have the puck, when you're playing a good 200-foot game, that doesn't mean you avoid the net front. Because Travis was getting his goals in that net front early on in the season when he looked like he was going to have a nice bounce back from a kind of an empty bubble experience. And so between that, with Patrick and Konechny being more perimeter players, we have Oscar Lindblom, who might be struggling with his conditioning. As many smart plays as he makes, you can see he's struggling a little bit, but I think he's got a lot more leeway than somebody like Konechny or even Patrick, who's kind of in between those two. He's got some conditioning issues, but I think even Lindblom will get to the net and try and make plays.
Yeah. I mean, players like Konechny, there's only one guy I've ever seen that plays like Konechny that just never seems to go through a stretch where they're sore or hurt or whatever, and maybe play a little more perimeter than they're supposed to until they get back into it again. And that's what I'm thinking, that Konechny, that is having something in that issue. But I don't know. I have no insight on that whatsoever. It's just my guess based on his play. And that's Gallagher. Gallagher's the only one I've ever seen that's been able to keep up with that on a consistent basis every single game. So I'm going to give Konechny a little bit. I think he'll get back to it. As far as, but I agree with you, though. It has to be. It simply has to be for his game. If he's not doing that, you might as well bench him. But
for now, I mean, listen, I love Travis.
Not forever, but he's not effective enough to be up there if he's not doing that. And I can completely understand how sometimes he's in a kind of, having a lingering injury or something where he can't do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But yeah, and I think he's in the doghouse for the reasons we outlined. But there perhaps there is an injury as to, to explain his perimeter or more perimeter-oriented play. So I think that he's somebody we're gonna watch to be a little bit better when they resume play on Sunday, hopefully. Yeah. Touch wood. And then we got to talk about Carter Hart kind of struggling a little bit. He's won some games where he hasn't played his best, but he's made momentum saves. But you can't get past an .897 save percentage and a 3.49 goals against average, realizing that he has been hung out to dry, especially if I'm going to mention that they're they're in negative shot value of over 100 in shots for and against net, shots. You got to give him a little bit of a break. But he has been vastly outplayed in the small number of games that we've seen. Brian Elliott, who's at .929 with a goals against a 2.19, and has certainly helped the team at some critical moments.
Right. Yeah. I think this is the first time in Hart's career that he has personal frustration. I've never seen, and like I said, I've watched him. He's from Sherwood Park here, where in Alberta, where I'm from. And the thing that always blew me away about him was that nothing seemed to faze him. So for him to lose his mind and break his stick over a post or something like that, that is very telling. Maybe it's a good thing too. That kind of fire certainly is what we were talking about with the Philadelphia Flyers. That's what we want to see. We want to see people that hate losing and play that way. And that's what I kind of think is missing sometimes with the Philadelphia Flyers. The hate to lose part of the game that you see with the Boston Bruins and now with the Tampa Bay Lightning in a lot of ways, where they don't really show that they hate to lose, but that's where the pushback, I think, comes from a lot. And so seeing Carter Hart do that is great. But on the same note, I don't know where to go from here because I've never seen Carter Hart act like that before. So, I imagine he'll get it back going again. But I'm just a little concerned about where he is psychologically because I've just never seen him do that.
No, and I think it is good that someone cares. A couple things. Following this team for 51 years, the original guy who hated to lose more than he loved to win was probably, it's a toss-up between Barry Ashby and Bob Clark. And
right.
those two set the cultural template for the team that lasted, some 50 years. And I think it's kind of whittled away. And part of that, I think, is under the Hextall regime. And we'll get to that in a minute.
Right. Yeah.
It's a whole other thing. I think the team was dying on a vine, and clearly they were not really going for anything. And I think over that period of time, that ethos, that credo, had kind of evaporated. And the win now mentality of Paul Holmgren was all about that, trying to do something to win. And so whenever you go to gain something, you're going to lose something. I think that's something that's been whittled away, and I think also it reflects in their lack of engagement physically. I think that's all part and parcel. There's an issue on this team, in my humble opinion, that you get players like Oscar and Nolan, Patrick getting run at, and there's no response, and there's nobody really who can respond, who has any skill. You can throw Sam Moran out there, but he's barely an NHL player at this point, certainly at wing at all. So I think that's an area that, as we turn towards looking at maybe what could have been done differently and what could be done before the trade deadline, they need some jam. They need some grinders in here, and guys that will provide some of that pushback, which will make other players braver. And not have to put up. So we don't have, nobody wants to watch a Philadelphia Flyers team that goes up against the Islanders or the Bruins, teams that look like they, stole the Flyers' lunch money, and there's nothing the Flyers can do about it.
Yeah, no, I forgot to mention, I totally agreed with you with Chara too. I would absolutely love to have Chara. That's a great addition to that team. Certainly would have been better than maybe the way they did spend money on defense. Absolutely. But like Foligno's, there's guys you can look around the league. You don't even have to have, it doesn't even have to be a big part of your team. And as far as hating to lose and or loving to win, there's either one is good. Sometimes some people are more, I love to win more than I hate to lose. Some people are, I hate to lose more than I love to win. Two tennis players, and I follow tennis quite a bit. Djokovic said once that he loves to win more than he hates to lose. And Mac, what's his name? His name escaped me now. McEnroe was announcer at the time and said, well, that wasn't me. I hated to lose more than I loved to win. But both of them succeeded exceedingly with one of those philosophies. One of those philosophies has to be huge in an organization for you to be successful. And Philadelphia Flyers have been known for their hate to lose. And I agree with you. I can see what you're saying with the whole Hextall situation. It's that constant struggle between what's on the ice and management and what you decide to do and what's going to be best for your future and all of those sort of things like that. But somehow a team still has to maintain the hate to lose, even if the management is like, okay, we're going to have to be okay with losing for now.
Right, and that's why you make a silly, kind of pathetic move during the tenure of Hextall of calling up Terrell Goulbourne every time things get a little haywire. That was kind of like a panic. I don't really know what else to do. I'll call up Terrell Goulbourne. You can't. It has to be somebody significant in the lineup who provides pushback, sandpaper, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned we talk about Nick Foligno or his brother.
Yeah. The Folignos are a really good example of that.
Yeah.
Just came to the top of my head that those guys are like, you see it on the ice.
Exactly.
Like you just see it on the ice.
You don't want to play against them. You have to be tougher to play against. So You're not one of those teams that can be run out of the rink. You may technically and analytically be doing well, but this is a human experience, and they know who rules the roost. When the Islanders are on the ice, they beat the Islanders. They were outplayed in both of those contests, in my humble opinion, if I recall correctly. And now the Islanders are back in the playoff picture. We're going to get to the Penguins with Hextall and Brian Burke. But let's take a little break right there. And I just want to remind the people about Jim's South Street, 400 South Street, 4 decades of some of the best Philly cheesesteaks and hoagies you could ever want. You have to get down there to South Street and check them out. In the grandest tradition of this Philly cheesesteak, with or without, doesn't matter. And you know the great thing, if you live near 400 South Street in Philadelphia and you can't make it over, they work with DoorDash, so that delicious food will be delivered right to your door. So check them out. Remember, Jim South Street, right at 400 South Street in Philadelphia. Okay, so Steve, let's get into a little bit about the hiring of a division rival, whether it's East Division or the Metro, who hopefully will get back to normal. Ron Hextall is named the GM. Brian Burke, in a move I didn't see coming, hired as the president of hockey operations. It's really funny. We referred to Ron Hextall and his plan and his patience earlier, and then get a guy like Brian Burke, who's known more for, pushing the chips all into the middle of the table, doing more win now stuff. And it's a very interesting contrast that Mario Lemieux and his, board of directors have come up with as we go forward with the Pittsburgh Penguins and their current situation.
It is an interesting combination. I don't know necessarily that it's a bad combination. Hextall is a builder. There's no doubt about that. He sees it from a building mentality. And it's something you have to have. I think in an organization as well, there's a balance there, and it's a delicate balance, and it's one that if it's off balance, your organization could be in big trouble for a very long time. So in this way, you have two on, I wouldn't necessarily say opposites, but Burke certainly has shown to be able to move organizations very quickly. And Pittsburgh really, I think as a whole, they see the rebuild coming, no doubt about that, but they certainly want to do it quickly. Now, Hextall, we can say what we want. He actually did rebuild it fairly quickly in Philadelphia. However, the thing is he just wanted it to be stronger in the future. He wanted to build it so it never ended. That was the thing with Ron Hextall. And in that way, some may say that he lost sight of the product on the ice at the moment. Would you agree with that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the plan became more important than what he had right in front of him. I've said that several times. You just can't let a team die on a vine. Well, you have players that are still in their prime. They're making a lot of money. Like, what are they there for? Why did he hang on to Claude Giroux and Voracek and Simmons as he did, when it was pretty clear that the future of the team at his current rate of growth was going to be Sean Couturier? Why did he not move on from those players? And this thing was going to go on for another couple years. And he would not, I don't think he would have made the moves like Fletcher did when he added Niskanen and Braun and tried to shore up this team so they could make some kind of run and have a much more enjoyable year without interfering with the process of kind of taking this thing with the draft picks to its natural fruition.
I'm first of all, with that you asked that question, how much was it him that didn't want to move on, or how much was it that above his head has said that's off limits and you got to work with it? That's possible. The other thing that you see what happened with Chicago, where they basically didn't mention the rebuild word for a year, for a few years, even though they were doing it, which to me was obvious. Apparently to Tays, it wasn't. They utilized their veterans without knowledge of a rebuild to have these young people feed off of them. And maybe that's what Hextall was kind of reaching for there. And then it got to the point where it's like, okay, we got to move on from Voracek. We got to move on for Giroux. And he was getting resistance. And the writing started to become on the wall that they didn't want to go through that more. They thought they had enough young people that Hextall had brought in. That's enough. Let's go. And that's where things kind of fell off a cliff. That's just speculation on my part based on the things I saw.
I can tell you that Dave Scott, who was the CEO, kind of took over where Peter Luco had been and had been entrusted by Snyder. I mean, he was in combination with Holmgren and Bob Clark saying to Hextall, listen, you just can't ignore the team that you have here. And Hextall kept saying, it's not go time. This thing still needs more of a build. But it was like one extreme or the other, where Fletcher kind of is trying to mesh these two concepts so they can have some cohesiveness, at least until the cap situation allowed for him to have more flexibility to take this thing to another level. Then, of course, we had the pandemic. I just think that Hextall lost sight of everything. And then they became very insular and had his people spying on different elements of the organization. Gord Murphy was reporting directly back to Hextall about what was going on with certain players. He had certain rules with the Alumni Association, and he tried to change everything. And I think he got a little bit drunk with the power and a little self-righteous about it. So when he had his little press conference a couple days after his being relieved of duty, it was a little bit of a cleanup on aisle 4. And not everything that he said had the ring of truth. I'll put it that way. I just think that he got caught a little too deep in his own mind, in the abstract of where he wanted this thing to be. It's almost like he wanted to take his experience and how they build a champion in Los Angeles and just do the same thing here. It didn't work. It wasn't going to work.
It almost sounds like you're saying that what he really wanted at the end of it all, and maybe he's come to terms with this now, is he wanted it to be his.
Well,
it's like he wanted to say that it was him. His ego started coming over him.
Oh,
he just wanted it. He wanted it to be his, and he wasn't going to, he didn't want it to be anybody else's. Maybe he had reached that point.
I don't know if he had become that megalomaniacal about it. But I do think his ego got involved, and he
subconsciously. I don't think consciously. He was telling himself.
It's very possible. But either way, it was unsustainable. And his record as a trader and his acquisition of pro players was not very good. All he was very good at, what he did well, was install systems and protocols for development, drafting, conditioning.
Which was much needed. Yeah, that was much
stuff.
Needed.
Definitely. I mean, he's famous for having a conversation with Paul Holmgren, going down to Lehigh Valley or up to Lehigh Valley and saying, "Hey, Paul, how many of these players are ours?" like how many of these players that we're watching, or ours, are going to have a real future with the organization? And your best player was, I don't know, Testweedy, and then the guy who got the skate cut, who had to retire. He's coaching now. His name escapes me. But really just marginal prospects. So they went and drafted Sam Moran, which is unfortunately a whiff. So I think that there was certainly room for something like what Hextall did. I don't knock that. But when it came time to actually do something on the pro level, the only thing he was able to do very well was clear salary with the Grossman trade and making the trade for Chemo to Chicago and some of those picks, how that turned out. Yeah, that's fine. He was good at it. But building a foundation, yes. Building a pro NHL team to where they're at, that remains to be seen. And maybe that's why Brian Burke is there, to kind of prod Ron Hextall to take action at a moment in the future. Of course, if you look at Pittsburgh, there's a rumor that the reason that Rutherford had to step down, or felt compelled to step down, was he wanted to trade a player like Letang, and the management didn't trust him to do that. I don't know if that's true or not. That was the rumor. And then as soon as they lose confidence in you, it's time to go. So, what do you have? I would imagine you're going to have to keep Crosby, and everybody else could go, and they would rather trust a good foundation builder like Hextall to be the guy to do that than Jim Rutherford, who's really good for winning for today.
Yeah. This is what I think. I listen to rumors and I try to apply logic to them.
Right.
To me, what happened there was not that he wanted to trade Letang. What happened was he was told to trade Letang, and he refused to do it.
Okay.
Because he knew that meant they were in a rebuild, and Rutherford wants nothing to do with that. So he stepped down, rightfully, because that's not what he's supposed to do. Not only that, if he's being told to do that, he knows the writing's on the wall that he's not going to be there by the end of the year, because they're not going to use Rutherford to rebuild at his age and whatever, and his reputation and everything. So that would be more likely to me, if that rumor has any validity whatsoever,
sure,
that's what happened, because that's likely. I'm just basing this on what you're seeing happen. If you're bringing in a guy like Hextall, don't expect Letang to be there for very long if you're going to give him the reins, because he's going to look at this organization and go, we got to rebuild. And then, so that's, Letangs and a whole bunch of other players are going to be definitely traded for picks. Now, what I think Hextall did better than many people that have tried to do it have done is he got really good NHL ready young talent back in his trades, and that were not like closer to NHL ready, not just draft picks, but prospects that sped it up. And that's what I think is likely going to happen there. So the reason why I'm saying that's why I think happened with Rutherford is because their next general manager was a guy that's probably going to do exactly that.
Yeah, no, that certainly makes sense. I just wanted to make a correction about something I said earlier. In the second Islander game, the Flyers actually did play well most of the game. They had some really bad lapses, and ended up winning that game in overtime. And that was the Farabee hat trick game. But I'm going to have to retract my statement that they were outplayed in both of those games. In the first Islander game, they were definitely outplayed and got lucky to win. The second one, I have to give the Flyers credit where it's due, so I stand corrected on that one. But getting back to Hextall and Brian Burke, we'll see how that works out. I think you probably have a really good point there with what went on with Rutherford, and might have been told to trade him. We don't know, but that's applying some deductive reasoning there. So. Yeah. We'll see what happens.
But as far as Burke is concerned, I mean, he's a fantastic draft and developer. He did awesome work in Vancouver. He changed the structure of Toronto and put a base there where they are starting to see the fruits of it. He is fantastic in that area. He's a great draft and developer. Now, that being said, he isn't known for his patience. You're right. So that combination of characters is going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that'll be a little soap opera on the side we can watch. I don't, I predicted that Pittsburgh would miss the playoffs this year. I thought the Islanders were going to overtake them. And the current four that we have, Boston, Philadelphia, the Caps, and the Islanders, are the ones I picked to make the playoffs.
Me too.
And
yeah.
I do think I look for the Rangers to rally and get close, but not quite make it. We'll see. One other topic of discussion before we get rolling and review the schedule. And that's what, we talked about what the Flyers needed coming out of the bubble. And I've touched on this in several shows. It now stands out in bold relief that when you bring back players like Haig and Braun, and you go out and acquire Gustafsson when you have a player like Gostisbehere in your lineup, his improved play notwithstanding going into the season. And you think the Flyers need more grit. They need a minute muncher on defense. If Niskanen's not going to be there, to me, it does call into question in a buyer's market that the GMs had. Like, what was Fletcher thinking looking at this team? What was he hoping for? What am I missing as a fan in terms of my dissatisfaction with the moves that they made?
I wish I could answer your question. The Gustafsson acquisition to me I couldn't find an angle that made sense, except that they had looked around and nobody else seemed interested, and they just needed a defenseman. It seemed like a snap decision. Based on what Gustafsson had been doing up until that point, $3 million even for 1 year just seemed ludicrous.
It's almost like they had a deal for Gostisbehere and it fell through or something. It's like they signed out, let me get this guy. I think we got a deal for Shane. And then it didn't pan out or something.
Maybe. I mean, you could be right there.
It never made sense. And
that does make more sense when you mentioned that. That's a good lean there. I like that.
Because it was early in the process. And then I understand the knee jerk to bring back Justin Braun.
Braun, yeah. A little bit.
And they brought him back at almost like they got him for the same amount over 2 years, practically, that they paid him last year, what he had left with the deal with the Sharks. And I even questioned bringing back Haig. Now that I look back, and Haig has just, listen, I understand he's got some physicality back there. The guy really struggles with his outlet passes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
He just gives the puck away. You watch him, and he just throws it off the glass, and it's like restarting the play for the opposition.
I'm so glad you noticed that, my friend. You know how many people that I have this argument with where they say we need a good defensive defenseman? And I'm like, well, if he does like what you're saying, what Haig does, it's the same as what Goose does.
Well, Gustafsson
in a lot of ways.
The thing
it's
I
still
like
coming back into the zone.
Gustafsson has some, I wouldn't call it elite, but really good vision and can make some plays. Some of them are high risk. I love him on the power play compared to Provorov because he gets his shots through. He has much better vision. He has a higher offensive hockey IQ than Provorov in a man advantage circumstance.
Yeah.
But other than that, he's a train wreck in his own zone.
Oh,
he's
absolutely.
Not physical.
Absolutely.
Haig is physical.
Yeah.
Haig just can't get the puck out of the zone. That's really the main thing.
What I mean by that in the regard of giving up the puck, it's similar to what Gustafsson does, except Gustafsson directly passes the puck to somebody else, where Haig goes off the boards first before he gives it to the opposition and they come back in. Overall, as a defenseman, I still take Haig over Gustafsson all day.
I guess on a penalty kill, you need. I mean, if you're going to be stuck in your own zone, and all you have to do, the only skill you need is to ice the puck, Yeah, I'll take
Yeah.
Robert Haig. But
There you go. Yeah.
that's it. Him and Justin Braun. Justin Braun looks slower this year. And he wasn't that fast last year. So maybe we can agree on this. The Flyers are going to need a defensive defenseman who can handle some tough minutes, probably at the level of a top 4, and they're going to need at least one forward in their top 9 to get replaced with somebody who's going to give them more jam. And
Yep.
as good a year as he's having in some respects, in other respects he's not. One of the trade candidates, and I think he actually fetched a decent haul, might be somebody like Scott Laughton. He's going to be a UFA at the end of this year, and I could see a lot of teams thinking, yeah, he'd be a good left winger on our third line, gives us some speed. I hate giving up speed, but I think he might be a trade candidate in that scenario. What say you?
Sure, he could be. It's going to cost us a draft pick and somebody like Lawton to get a high draft pick, so somebody that can play top 4 minutes, unless we can find a diamond in the rough somewhere. But yeah, I do agree with you that we have now left ourselves in that situation where we still need a top 4. And unfortunately, you got to lose a guy like Lotz for that. But then on the same note, like you said, we could use another top 6 forward. That's a lot of assets to give up, that we have to give up in order to acquire something like that if we absolutely need it. That those aren't easy trades to make.
No, they're not. It just depends on how, like, if you think the Flyers have anything near the kind of talent and the ability, the ceiling to go places in the playoffs, because right now I currently don't see that. I see them as a playoff team, not really much more.
I agree.
Unless some of those elements are addressed, then we have to ask ourselves, what are we here for? We're here to watch some hockey, but we're not really going to do anything.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Chuck Fletcher will make the determination whether it's worth it or whether he's going to play right into the hands of the thought process that says, hey, wait a minute, this year, let's just get by. Let's get past the expansion, find out who we're going to lose, who we want to hang on to, and go from there. But as you say that, if he's thinking that way, which I'm not sure that he is, that's another year off the career of Claude Giroux, Jake Voracek, and now, getting close to 30, Sean Couturier, getting nicked up a bit. He's had a couple knee injuries. So if he's going to be the new Giroux, he's going to be the new player that they build around. You have to take these factors into account.
Yeah. There's guys out there. I mean, it's going to be what's out there, I think, more than whether he thinks they need it or not. I think Fletcher knows they need it. It's what is going to be out there. I mean, I'm praying that Anaheim decides they want to do a more complete rebuild than they've done right now. And a guy like Josh Manson, or, wouldn't that be something? Oh my gosh, I would love to see Josh Manson in a Philadelphia uniform. Hampus Lindholm, somebody like that. But those are going to cost you a first, and a first at plus. So if we're prepared to do that, then if we really believe we're going to have a chance this year, I think you're right. I think we need some players like that, additions into our lineup. But we're going to have to give up. We're going to have to give up our first next year, almost assuredly, no doubt about it.
Well, I mean, there's a couple factors in play. There's the concern about the protection schemes for expansion. So if you get another defenseman, you get a guy like Lindholm, who I believe has a couple more years left on his deal. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking that up as we speak. And
Hampus Lindholm, that'd be all right.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly a top 4 defenseman. Now, he's only got one more year left at 5.25. So you'd have to trade a significant asset, and then he's a UFA. But then again, we have to trade. We have to pay a player like Travis Sanheim. So a lot of this has to do like, well, how much faith do you have in Sanheim going forward to become maybe a little bit more of a physical player? That's, is that a swap worth making? That might be a move that Murray says, you know what, I'll just do that straight up. Because
that would be interesting.
Because Lindholm, left-handed, he's 27, so he turns 28 in January of next year. So he just turned 27. So he's only a few years older. He's a better defensive defenseman than Sanheim, and
probably
you'd have to protect him, and then you could extend him, and maybe something could be contingent upon that. Or you say, listen, go with what we know. Sanheim could be as good, if not better, than Lindholm, but we're just jockeying around.
We're just
with one name, spitballing a little bit, just to give you an idea. But there's other players on that team that I like if they wanted more scoring. Rickard Rakell, there's another year left at 3.7. Not sure what he's been doing. And then maybe some players that have a little bit more grit. So,
I think that's what we're looking at. Is we're looking at those bottom feeder teams and seeing what we can pick away at, and maybe got closer to the trade deadline, like you said, we might be able to get something for lesser, like give up lesser value, because they're going to lose them anyways. Maybe we can pick up some guys like that out there. It actually could be a really good time for us to go for it because of that. There could be some guys out there we don't have to give up that first, or we don't have to give up Sanheim. It's a great luxury to have a guy like Sanheim playing on your 5-6 that can play great minutes, especially in the playoffs where injuries happen and all of that. So,
well, yeah, I mean, he could be the cost of acquiring that player, or he could be a guy that we're willing to let go. He's arbitration eligible for next year, so he's at a decision point. Gustafsson, I would think, is out of here no matter what, and they also have to pay Nolan Patrick, and Scotty Lawton's up again. I don't think Lawton. That's a coin flip. If he's not dealt, is he back next year? Not sure. Raffle, probably not. You got players like Tanner Lashinsky, who would have been knocking at the door, Linus Sandin, and then, maybe as early as next year, maybe Igor Zamula, and Cam York is probably going to take another year after that. So just throwing that out there a little bit, food for thought. Steve, let's wrap this up. The Flyers have a game coming up, hopefully, touch wood, this Sunday in New York at 6 p.m., Then they get a few days off and play the Rangers in Philadelphia on the 18th. And we'll just go from there. We'll have a show on the 15th. And we're going to have Colby Cohen, who was part of the Flyers broadcast and also part of Snow the Goalie podcast, ex-NHL defenseman. So he'll be our exclusive guest on the 15th. So we're real excited about that. But we've had a good show today. Steve, why don't you tell us where people can contact you and find the Pearl of Wisdom show on the Steel Flyers Network?
www.steelflyers.com, the all sports network. It's not just a Flyers network. It's all sports, all teams, all the time. Growing very large, getting big, and O&B and Nitty Gritty and all kinds of other people are part of it. We're having a fantastic time there. You can find me there. I have a show which I'll be doing later on this afternoon between 1 and 3 called The Pearl of Wisdom Show. You can find that on YouTube, My NHL Pearls of Wisdom on YouTube. That's 1 and 3 Mountain Time, 3 and 5 Eastern Time, between 3 and 5 Eastern Time. Sometimes we extend it, and it's a show that talks basically every team about hockey, and it's interactive. You can converse with us. And you can also go to Perlo's NHL POW on Twitter and join me there, and we can frolic together there. So, and then you can find me every once in a while here on the O&B, which has been absolutely awesome. It's so fun working with you, bro. I love it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we love having you along. You come from a different perspective out there in Western Canada, and I like that. I mean, you've been following this game, about as long as I have, and it's really cool to get that outside perspective, because we get kind of parochial, as they have said in the past on terrestrial radio. Philadelphia can be that way. I think there's an element of truth to that. So, Yeah,
Sure.
definitely appreciate that. So, yeah, I'm Isaiah on Twitter. You can follow me at Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget the underscore 520. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. We're also on Gab. We're trying to reach out to as many people as we can at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. And also, if you could rate and subscribe, if you're on YouTube, if you could subscribe to us, hit that notification bell, and you'll know the next time a new O&B Puckcast comes out. And of course, on Apple Podcasts, any 5-star review you could give, you could write us a good review if you like us. If not, we can take the truth. But more importantly, it moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyers podcasts, and we do appreciate that. So until next time, on the 15th, with Colby Cohen and the regular crew, everybody take care.